Hey everybody! So what's the deal with Barbenheimer? Alright, so like everyone and their grandma, I decided to watch both Barbie and Oppenheimer this weekend, and who would have thunk, but it was a great adventure. This was probably the greatest movie marketing I've ever seen, and I love how it was completely accidental, and just a product of creativity and word of mouth of the common people. This was of course due to two things. 1. They both came out on the same day. 2. That's it. These movies are complete opposites in every way. Tone, genre, plot, message, and yeah, literally everything. But that makes it fun. One movie is a biopic about the brilliant physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his inner turmoil during his journey on making the atomic bomb. The other movie is a live-action film all about the world of Barbie encountering the struggles of the real world and the satirical take of this beloved children's doll, with grown adults playing as simplified caricatures like children do. The beauty of movies is that you can enjoy things like both Barbie and Oppenheimer at the same time, and that's completely normal. Cinema is cinema, no matter what. So you might as well help support the industry and watch both, and both are amazing in their own unique way. If you only liked one over the other, that's perfectly okay too. Develop your taste and say, I like this, and or this, and that's awesome. Personally, I think both of these movies have charm, and both had a lot of hard work put into them, and that's great. In this video, I, Cain Keltic of Keltic Productions, have watched both movies, and so I thought, why not review both for a 2-for-1 deal, and explain why I think both movies worked, and what I liked and or disliked about the movie. First, I think we should start with the sillier movie of the two, and talk about one of the most funniest, charming, happiest movies of all time. Man, this movie was depressing. This movie was really fucking good, and completely amazing, and surpassed all my expectations somehow. But it was really depressing. This movie was directed by Christopher Nolan, and this is a bit of a spicy take, but I don't really like any Christopher Nolan movies, at all. I'm sorry, Dark Knight fans, but I thought all of his movies that I've seen anyways were quite boring, generic action schlock with a false substance and no real soul put into it. But this movie was the first of his to truly change my mind. This movie was brilliant, and you need to watch it now, goddammit. Cillian Murphy, aka the Peaky Blinder, aka the Scary Crow, plays the protagonist of real-life physicist Julius Robert Oppenheimer. If Cillian does not get nominated from this movie, then all the award shows are meaningless and just liars. Oh wait. Anyways, as I was saying, Cillian Murphy really steals the whole show as Oppenheimer, showing his true descent into this downward spiral of doom and destruction. From what research I did for the true story of Oppenheimer, I learned that he was apparently very mopey and regretful for what he did, and could anyone truly blame the guy who invented the nuke? Murphy understood the assignment perfectly, and really knew how to play a truly broken man, blinded by his ambition and hopes for the future. You get to see this guy who was a brilliant scientist who only focused on theoretical quantum mechanics, which is relatively harmless in the grand scale of the world, but then he becomes responsible for the most likely cause of human extinction, and it truly breaks him, and he's no longer the ambitious bright man, but death, the destroyer of worlds. While this movie's main highlight is the story of Oppenheimer himself and his journey, there are many other things that I did quite like about this movie. For one, the movie looked absolutely beautiful, and looked like a giant canvas of Van Gogh or Picasso. I didn't see the movie in IMAX, but I did watch it in a theater of course, and it was gorgeous. The shots of the atoms and electrons moving around were beautiful and chaotic, and the fire was also beautiful, but somber. Very somber. All the flames don't look like simple chemical reactions, they look like the Grim Reaper's scythe, slashing the world in one fatal, blazing swoop. The cinematography and the editing in this movie were also brilliant and stunning, and someone as incompetent such as myself in that line of work could truly see the talent and dedication to making something visually appealing as this movie was. The sporadic shots when the movie was getting intense and the slow motion with absolute silence were gorgeous, and I think it's just peak cinema, and was truly the symbol Oppenheimer's story needed to be, both visually and symbolically. Also, something I really need to mention is how great this movie's soundtrack and audio design was. Ludwig Göransson is one of my favorite composers of all time, so finding out that he made the soundtrack after finishing the movie made complete sense to me, as I knew it had to be a real artist to make music as impactful as it was. The intense strings and slight industrial sounds really sound like the mind of a scientist. Professional and formal, but with the images of the future and the world always in the back of their head. Ludwig makes this movie absolutely devastating. It makes the bomb feel like it's playing a somber, sorrowful lament, as it knows it has doomed the world and humanity. The sounds in general in this movie were great as well, as it was very, very loud, as any movie about a nuke should be. The detonation of the nuke was brilliant, as there's this heartbeat stomping sound for a few minutes beforehand, and it makes the scene so dramatic as the stomping gets louder and louder till the nuke explodes, only for then to be complete silence, completely subverting viewer expectations as you just stare in awe without a single decibel of audio, only for it to then make the movie as loud as possible after fully admiring the nuke and making its effect explode everywhere, and that is including your eardrums. The constant use of that stomping when things get intense, and then silence at its peak volume worked so well, and I was so stunned by how efficient it worked in any situation. From the big nuke going boom, to a dramatic argument, to perhaps the most impactful scene in the movie, the final shot. The final shot is not even about the movie itself, as it is something beyond the movie, but a message to the world. A message that this man, this brilliant man, destroyed our world without knowing it, and we may have our whole world surrounded in fire sooner than we know. Apparently this ending made a lot of people emotionally devastated and really depressed, and I completely get it. But I think it's beautiful to an extent, and I sort of understand it. Throughout the movie, we get the comparison of Oppenheimer to the ancient Greek story of Prometheus, a story that I'm vaguely familiar with. A titan who gives humans fire after stealing it from the gods, only to be punished by being tortured for all of eternity. This metaphor makes a lot of sense, as Oppenheimer truly did gift fire to humans again. The atomic bomb, one of our greatest tools that causes so much destruction, and Oppenheimer was punished like Prometheus for the rest of his existence too. As he knows, the blood of possibly billions could be on his hand for the rest of humanity. This movie was just heartbreaking, but it may be one of my favorite movies of all time. But I will need to give it time to settle down and truly comprehend. But this is certainly one of the greatest movies I've seen in a while. I only have 3 complaints for this movie, but none of them are too serious in my opinion, and didn't cause any major problems for my enjoyment of the film. One complaint I have is that the non-linear storytelling was bizarre, and although it was an artistic choice from Nolan, I do have to wonder whether or not it was necessary for a biopic, as it caused some mild confusion early on. But afterwards, I think it provides more creative writing and allowed for more potential in storytelling. But I did have to sit for a while afterwards, putting the pieces to the puzzle together, but maybe that was a good thing. It also felt like the pacing was a little too. At some points in the movie, there's quite a lot going on all at once, and the film will make sure to test your memory and attention span, as the payoff is only awarded to those who can understand all that's going on at once. But at other points in the movie, it feels like a bit of a drag, and nothing really substantial is happening for too long, and you have to wonder why Nolan made these scenes stretch out for so long, as their purpose seems vague or simply just filler, which is not a necessity for a 3-hour biopic. My last real complaint for this movie is that it's mandated to do your research on Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project in general if you want to truly understand it and appreciate this film for what it is. I was told online to do this beforehand, but I did not have the time to truly look into it, and I believe that I had enough previous knowledge on Oppenheimer to be content with. This turned out not to be the case, however, as the plot is very convoluted, and some storylines didn't make any sense for me, as I'm not aware of what was truly happening, causing me to not get a satisfying payoff to everything I saw, but it was minuscule enough for me to turn a blind eye to, and everything that did make sense, I enjoyed. I do think I'll do some research on Oppenheimer after watching the movie, and I think it will make everyone's viewing experience far more enjoyable, as you will be confident in what you are watching. Now, after stating all of this, I hope you can appreciate the Oppenheimer movie and understand its value, while also being morbidly entertained from this dark picture. This movie was very, very dark, but it was not the most disturbing or darkest movie released recently, as there was also the horrifying thriller recently released called Well, this movie certainly surpassed my expectations quite heavily. I actually had pretty high hopes for this movie too, so it's honestly extremely impressive how good this movie was. Was it Oppenheimer levels of good? We'll get to that later, but was this movie amazing? It absolutely was. If you didn't know this already, this movie was directed by Greta Gerwig and written by the legendary Noah Baumbach. Greta Gerwig is an actress and director who often starred in Noah Baumbach films. Greta has made a couple movies at this point, but I haven't watched any of them yet. Though Lady Bird is certainly on my watch list, and I'll look into Little Women soon enough. Noah Baumbach, on the other hand, is a director I'm extremely familiar with, and I've liked every one of his movies that I've seen. Like Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, arguably the worst Madagascar, absolute artist. Also, he made a Marriage Story and Frank's Hall and a bunch of other movies that were okay, I guess, but whatever. When I first heard of the announcement, I was extremely pumped, and I knew this movie was going to be the purest kino I've ever seen. And it was more than pure, it was fucking holy. I didn't know that this movie was rated PG-13 until right before watching it, and my god, it is very apparent, and it was clear Greta was trying to push that rating as far as she could, and it led to some pure comedic gold. There's a lot of innuendos and just inappropriate language and lines in general, and usually that's just some cheap lowbrow humor for grown-ups in these kind of movies. But the writing was honestly really clever, and I appreciated how smooth and well-timed y'all felt. And I think it was very appropriate for this kind of film. If you haven't watched this movie, let me be perfectly clear. This movie is not just a stereotypical and childish film about Barbie. In fact, I think most, if not all, kids who watch this movie might not even like this movie. It just doesn't fit the norm of Barbie's image, and I think that's the whole point. This is a very clear, satirical, meta take on the whole Barbie brand as a whole, and it's very self-aware and not trying to hide it. This movie is less about a live-action Barbie in the real world, but an empowering feminist comedy that's not trying to be too in-your-face about it, and I was certainly fine with it, even if the message wasn't for me. The movie's message is for women of all ages, 0 through 100, to be proud of who they are and encourage them that they can do anything so long as they try hard enough, even if society doesn't give you the respect you deserve. Barbie is actually a good vessel for this message, since her brand has been around for decades and people know her as the stereotypical norm for women and represents what a woman should be in society, although it differs for the individual, especially if you're not a woman. Speaking of the actual Barbie herself, let's talk about Margot Robbie. One of the perfect casting choices I've seen ever, even with appearances aside. Originally, it was supposed to be Amy Schumer who played Barbie, which is just yucky. No. Why? Thankfully, that didn't happen in this universe, although the alternate timeline is officially doomed, but we got Margot Robbie, and she was perfect. This may be another one of my spicier takes, but I don't love her as Harley Quinn. I like her a bit as Harley Quinn, but certainly not as much as others. Barbie, on the other hand, I have no complaints. She captures the bubbly, overly optimistic nature of Barbie, like most people think of, but when she starts to come into the real world, you can really see her pain and stress and mental anguish in general, and I think that takes real talent. You feel bad for her as you see these childlike innocent women have to suddenly deal with the real relatable issues actual people face in the grown-up world. She goes through a real arc too, and really discovers her true identity and soul after all the troubles and tribulations she deals with for 2 hours straight. Also, her decision near the final 15 minutes of the movie, and that scene in general, was true peak cinema, and I thought it was the most beautiful part of the movie. Speaking of beautiful things in this movie, Ryan Gosling. Am I right or am I right? Though I do think Margot had a better performance as Barbie, Ryan Gosling as Ken had to be my favorite character, and I think he did amazing. Ryan Gosling is one of my favorite actors of all time, So seeing him play as a stereotypical bro dude sigma male alpha Chad was great, and it's clear that he did truly amazing. He had the funniest lines and greatest executions of all of them in this movie. Even if some of the lines were a bore or not the most interesting, Gosling's charisma and heart makes it so unique and funny. Ken, and this Ken specifically, was hilarious, and it was so fucking funny, he makes me want to merge without looking. I love how he was probably the closest thing to the antagonist to this movie, but he wasn't evil or anything, he was just completely incompetent after exposure to the toxic masculinity of the real world, and I think that's very clever writing. He was a good symbol for this giant metaphor of a movie, while also being completely entertaining for the whole ride, and went on a far worse arc than Barbie. But I still enjoyed his journey nearly as much, just for being Ken. Also, can we take the time to appreciate the cinematography of this movie? It was fucking brilliant, and so stunning. Let's take the time to mention both cinematographer Rodrigo Prieto for Barbie, and Hoyt van Hoytema for Oppenheimer. The shots in this movie were so creative, and truly felt like a dollhouse playset, and at other times it felt like the mind of a child or a really cheap Christian musical. The choreography in this movie was also flawlessly perfect. Both Margot's dance scene near the beginning and Gosling's dance battle in his I'm Just Ken song. I love seeing Ryan Gosling sing and dance because La La Land to me should be called Pee Peak. Wait. Anyways, the soundtrack for this movie was okay, but definitely not for me. I'm not a big pop or bubblegum pop guy, so I don't think the music was meant for me. But the artists certainly tried their best to make something recognizable and high quality, and I do think that's perfectly true, and I'll give it to them that they exceeded in that way at least. For complaints, I don't really have any, as I don't think this movie is flawed, but it's either just not for you, or just didn't have enough content. Like, if you don't care about the troubles and issues of women or whatever, or if you don't really care about girly stuff, then this movie may not be for you. If you expect some masculine macho action flick when entering Barbie, then that's obviously not going to happen. So you either want to watch the movie, or you won't be interested in it in the first place. If you do want to watch this movie, then chances are you're going to like it. So, no worries there, I suppose. My only personal complaint is that there was so much opportunity for more to do in this movie, but this movie chose to be shorter than longer, which is fine, I suppose. As a family movie that was advertised as, then it's better to be short and sweet. Oh, also, I didn't care for Will Ferrell's character and his little board of Barbie heads. There was potential for them to be interesting, but they appeared so briefly and didn't really have any significance or closure to be featured in this movie, and probably would have been better without. But I understand what Gerwig was trying to do. Overall, this movie was absolutely phenomenal as well, and I thought it was one of the greatest comedies of the year, and movies of the year for that matter, and would be quite iconic in Gerwig and Baumbach's filmography. Now then, after reviewing both movies, I have learned a lot over the weekend. These movies were both extremely great in their own way, and I think that one was the best drama and biopics in years, and I think the other was the greatest family and comedy movie in years. Barbie was funny, and had a really good and strong message presented in a funny way. Oppenheimer was a beautifully bold and dark story of the modern Prometheus, and shows the mind and heart of the modern Grim Reaper. After reviewing the two, I'm sure you're expecting me to tell you which one was the better movie, but I'm sorry to disappoint you. I thought both movies were brilliant and amazing, and I love how different they both are, but they were both movies, which is common enough ground for me to say, hey, these two are amazing. But they're even better together, and I love that, and it enhanced both by a good margin too. So watch both if you haven't, and tell me why you liked or disliked either one or both of them, as I think that's the best part about Barbenheimer. Now, with all of that said, Oppenheimer was better. Fight me, okay, bye!
Angela, look out your window. You see that Anheuser-Busch billboard next to the Children's Hospital? Well, watch this. Oh, God. Oh, my God, this is horrible. Oh, God. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, good Lord, save them. Bless their Oh, okay, yeah. Here we go. All right, everything worked out.